Hello, I'm Jay Warren, and this is a reading from my forthcoming novel, Unbalanced Mercy. Section 1, Special Agent Paul Lowe. I'm sitting at my desk finishing up the latest paperwork. Guy who ordered a hell of a lot of fertilizer also happened to have some hits on an alt-right website, so ASAC Wicks tells me, go knock on his door. There I am then on the next flight to Wyoming. Turns out the guy's a bit of a racist jerk-off, but he's legit. Divide number of acres owned by total poundage and bingo. Just more paperwork. Don't get me wrong, this stuff isn't glamorous, but it's important. I'd much rather find out the guy is just some yokel who thinks his biggest accomplishment is his skin color than a bad guy with a plan, if you see what I'm saying. After all that stuff last year, I don't mind a bit of crossing some T's, you know? Paul, see you for a minute? Director Jimenez stuck her head through the doorway and asked. I looked up from the computer screen and, if I'm being honest, barely managed to not jump out of my seat. Sure, I said. Then I stood up. Then I looked for my jacket, which was, as always, on the back of my chair. Even as I was doing these things, I felt how separate they were, how out of it I must look to anyone watching. And they were watching. It's not every day that one of the directors comes down for a chat. Normally they send for you. I walk out into the hall, sliding into my coat as I walked. The director was standing against the opposite wall. Walk with me, she said, turning her head and heading for the elevator. I caught up. You've been with the Bureau for how long now, Paul? She asked, pressing the button, then turning to face me. 3 years, I said. 3 years, she repeated, but her face showed nothing. The elevator arrived and we stepped inside. She pressed the button for the second subfloor, almost the lowest anyone could go in the building. The doors slid closed. We both faced forward. Your record is fantastic, especially considering that thing last year, the church bombings, she said. To be honest, how you handled that case made you a name people know upstairs. I didn't know whether to say thank you or not. When the doors opened, I expected to see endless rows of boxes and filing cabinets. As far as I knew, that was all that was down this far. I was mostly right, but the director began walking along a row of cabinets and turned a sharp right at the end of the row. She walked along a path between the end of that first row and the beginning of the second set of rows. After 100 feet or so, she turned a sharp left and we walked along another row. We crossed over another pathway between sets of filing cabinets and into another row. At the end of that row there was a wall, but also a small alcove. As we entered that alcove, I saw that there was a door on the left. The sign on the door said PI Division. The director stopped and turned to face me. You gained the reputation as someone who is level-headed, also able to think through difficult situations. That's a good thing. I wish I could say your reward was that we were moving you upstairs. Unfortunately, that is not the case. Ma'am? I asked. In just a moment, I'm going to knock on that door, she said, gesturing with her head, and introduce you to Special Agent Miranda Burton. She's the senior agent in charge of the PI division. At that moment, the door opened and a tall woman with glasses and dark hair to her collar appeared. She had on standard issue dark pants, light blue shirt, and navy blue suit jacket that almost all female agents wore these days. I was in the act of asking, PI division, Paranormal Investigation Division, Burton said, her hand still on the door. Special Agent Miranda Burton, this is Special Agent Paul Lowe, the director said. Burton stepped forward and extended her hand. I shook it out of reflex, but I still felt very confused. Welcome aboard, Burton said. Paul, I'm assigning you to PI until further notice. You will work alongside Agent Burton. You can call over to the pool and ask someone to bring down any personal effects from your desk. There weren't any. She already knew that. Wait, I don't understand, I started to say. Step in and we'll talk, Burton said, turning aside to allow me through the door. The director was already walking away. Ma'am? I asked. She stopped and turned on her heel. Make us proud. She then turned back and walked away. "Paul," Burton said, and when I looked back at her, she gestured through the door. I looked back toward the director's retreating back once more, then stepped through into the office. There were two desks loosely facing each other in a V shape on the edges of the room, and a waist-high table in the center. It was covered with boxes, sometimes stacked on top of one another, sometimes not, and over that were maps and photos. Toward the back of the room was another door. One of the desks was covered in folders and books. It had a computer monitor that was at least 10 years old, and a nameplate that read Miranda Burton. Behind the desk on the wall was a poster that read, "Hang in there," showed a kitten hanging onto a branch. The other desk was completely barren, but I could see in the dust that it used to have a computer monitor and a nameplate as well. The door closed behind me, and Burton came around to face me. She crossed her arms over her chest and waited until I'd finished surveying the room. "I'd offer you coffee, but it's on the blink. I've sent in a requisition for a new one, but who knows when that will get here." She stepped to her desk and leaned against it, arms still crossed. "Have a seat." I walked over to the empty desk and leaned against it, crossed my arms. It was only after I'd settled into it, too late to change, that I realized I had mimicked her pose exactly. I hoped maybe she wasn't the kind of person who would notice such a thing, but her left eyebrow inched up a bit. We weren't off to a great start. "First off, hello," she said. "I'm Miranda. Of course, I'll tell you that, and yet every single person I meet in this building insists on calling me Burton no matter what I say, so..." I didn't say anything, not out of any kind of hostility, but simply because I didn't know what to say. This wasn't my first transfer, if indeed that's what it was, but it was the first I'd ever had that was this unexpected. "Do you prefer Paul?" I nodded. "Good. Okay. Well, I prefer you call me Miranda, but I'm guessing you're going to call me Burton anyway, so there's that. I was assigned down here to PI about 4 years ago. At that time, the senior agent was Abner Booth, the man who used to work that desk," she said, gesturing with her forehead, arms still crossed. "What happened to him?" "Agent Booth, Abner, was killed in the line 3 weeks ago." "I'm sorry," I said, standing up and dropping my arms out of reflex. "Thanks," she said. I didn't see anything about it, an agent's funeral in the bulletin, did they?" "I asked them not to. There was a number of people that well, let's just say I was worried about who might show up. The family held a private ceremony. It was nice. Still, I'm sorry to hear it." She nodded, then looked back at me. Her eyes were the same color as dark oak, I noticed. 30 years with the Bureau, 10 of them down here working PI. I have to say, I'm more than a bit confused. What exactly is PI? "As the director said," she said, moving to the other door on the far end of the room and taking a key out of her pocket, "Paranormal Investigations Division." Wait, I said. "Like that TV show?" She laughed bitterly. "Do you know," she said, placing the key in the lock without looking at me, "that's the exact same question I asked Abner when I transferred down here." She shook her head and then turned the key. "Come on." She opened up the door. She stepped inside, and I followed. So I hope that you enjoyed that reading and that you'll consider purchasing my new novel, Unbalanced Mercy, available for pre-order now, direct from the publisher, through Amazon, and also on Kindle. Thanks.